What is the path of inquiry for understanding the nature of the mind? Because he has just revealed to us mind is nothing but cognition of objects. The nature of mind is thoughts. As I referred just a moment ago, go to verse number 17 of Udesh Saram. Read it again. Manasam tukim margane krite, neva manasam margarjavat. What is the nature of my mind? It is nothing but thoughts. There is no entity, no viscera called mind. It does not exist except for thoughts. So now the question is, what is the path of inquiry for understanding the nature of my mind? How do I know that my mind is just thoughts? What is that path? And here's Bhagavan saying, that which rises as I in the body is the mind. So every thought is egotistical thought. That's my mind. If one inquires as to where is the body, where in the body the thought I rises first, one would discover that it rises in the heart. Now, this is a matter to really understand pretty well if one wants to understand Bhagavan's teachings. That which rises as I, I'm going to repeat this for a moment, that which rises as I in this body is the mind. If one inquires as to where in the body the thought I rises first, one would discover that it rises in the heart. We'll come to heart in a moment. That is the place of the mind's origin. Even if one thinks constantly, I, or I am I, one will be led to that place. Of all the thoughts that arise in the mind, I thought is the first thought. The primordial thought is the I thought. It is only after the rise of that the other thoughts arise. It is after the appearance of the first person pronoun that the second and the third pronouns appear. Without the first personal pronoun, there will not be the second and the third. This we need to eschew and absorb, and we all can contribute for our clarity from each other as devotees. So Bhagavan uses the word heart. Bhagavan has used this word always in his teachings, and this he spoke when he was 21 years old. He didn't speak, I'm sorry. He wrote in Sant, as we all know. Bhagavan since then always used the word heart as the seat of the self. The self which is in his, whenever he gave us the injunction, when he gave us the teachings, the self was the ultimate self he was talking about, the reality. The same heart where the reality resides, which is not in this body, though he did tell people when inquired and questioned by Devraj Mudaliar or by Professor Syed Hafiz Syed, Professor of Philosophy, PhD from Allahabad University, a Muslim who would come and stay in Tiruvannamalai very often. Great devotee, challenged Bhagavan. Where is this heart that we talk about? And Bhagavan said, why do you have to worry about it? So I'm a limited being, I need to know. Please help me. And Bhagavan said, okay, 2 fingers to the right in your chest is the heart that I'm talking about, not the physical organ that pumps blood. And yet, at another point, when he was asked that I'm focusing on my heart, he says, no, because you're still thinking that the heart that I pointed out to you, 2 fingers to the right of your chest, you still think of it as a physical entity. And I gave you that definition because you were insisting, and he was talking in general to all the devotees, that we insisted to please identify for us. That's why I told you, it's not the left viscera that pumps blood, it is a little bit to the right. But actually it is not in the body. So heart is that seat from where it emanates. As I just moments ago had referred to Pashanti to Madhyama to Vaikari. Where does Pashanti emerge from? It is the primordial emergence of Adi Shakti. That is the point Bhagavan is referring to. It is from your heart that the mind arises. The aberration came from there, so it has to merge back into it. I rises first, and one would discover that it rises in the heart. That is the place of the mind's origin, as a spark having come out of it. And if one constantly thinks about this, that we just talked about, for us mortals, let's just look at my activities throughout the day. That's all I need to do. Need to be a simple person, need to look at my own intent, my jealousies, my hatreds, my anger, my pleasures, my possessions, my colleagues, my boss, my cousin who's not so kind to me, or my uncle was, and my likes and dislikes, and oh God, I mean, a plethora of definitions we have right in front of us. And if you constantly, that is the I am this, I am that, I'm the ultimate reality behind all this fallacy. Unfortunately, I've been doing the wrong stuff for such a long time that my habit doesn't go away. And therefore, I need to remove myself. So if one constantly reminds oneself about I, it will lead us to that place. Bhagavan is giving us the assurance that if we stay focused on that inquiry, it will bring us to the fulcrum, to the boiler point, to the base, to the sanctum sanctorum of that heart. Of all the thoughts that arise, and this we must be very clear. What does he mean by first person and the second person? As we have so many times talked about it, I starts when I'm just about 2 years old, and my parents tell me, Claps, where is Bob? And Bob points, and Bob's toy, and Bob's bed, and Bob's spoon, and this, and the identifications begin, and the ego begins to rise unknowingly, unintentionally, and nobody is doing this as nobody's aware of what is one doing. But this is the way ego rises. This is where the first person rose. And then the second person rose as my mom. Then the child begins to recognize my dad, and then the brother or sister, and blah and blah. And then it continues to, like the cobweb, my identifications, my second thought and third thoughts continue to multiply, one after the other. My friend's brother, my friend's parents, then my teachers, my classmates. Some I like, some I don't like, some I fight with, some I tease. Right? All those are second and third person. Everything, just if one were to think just for 5 minutes today, what is my first person and second person, third person? Your list will be endless. You wouldn't be able to even put the best of the programs to quickly type it. No, it'll go faster than that. Mind has the speed faster than light and faster than wind. So it is only after the rise of the first I thought that other thoughts arise. It is after the appearance of the first personal pronoun. Look at the extent to which Bhagavan is trying to expound it for us. It is after the appearance of the first personal pronoun that the second and the third person pronoun appears. Without the first personal pronoun, there will not be the second and the third. And there's another point to note here about Bhagavan, about the stature of Raman Maharshi. And one doesn't have to be his devotee, doesn't matter. It is his stature. Devoid of any devotees, he had no disciples. Just the other day in the satsang, somebody read a long passage from the talks and kept saying, because in the talks, many times it just says M for Maharshi, or B for Bhagavan, and D for devotee. And the person read very well, but constantly read it as disciple, disciple, disciple. And here are two things. Well, I'm going to come to this about how Bhagavan lived with this second and third thing. I want to give an example of that as I understood it in my younger days. And this person I wrote to in a very polite way, you read very well, it was excellent, blah, blah, blah. And I said in a footnote that Bhagwan didn't have any disciples. So you may want to just read as devotees. A person didn't like that. The ego is so big, people don't like it. Even when you point to the correct thing, they won't like it. When I don't like an advice, when I don't take an advice, when I can't take a critique, that's my ego. And we all have it. I'm not stepping out of it. I'm the first culprit here. I have a very big ego, with, like everybody else. But we can chisel it off. We can start chiseling off of it. So here's the first person, third person, second person. Bhagwan never ever identified with his name, never autographed, never said I'm Ramana, never said, listen to me, I'll give you the ultimate clarity. Never, not even once. And you all have heard the story from me, and I chant the shloka many, many times about the devotee who insisted on getting Bhagwan's autograph, right? You all remember? Bhagwan, please, he was here just for a few days and really was immersed in Bhagwan's presence, in Bhagwan's Sannidhi. He just thought that, wow, what a great experience he had. And then he goes and buys some books from the bookstore, comes back to the old hall, and says, Bhagwan, before I leave, because he was going to leave that day, can you please autograph the books? And Bhagwan doesn't respond, like he would just sit there quietly. And the shloka he writes is, you all have known that, right? Ekam aksharam riti nirantaram bhaste swayam likhyate katam. How can you write about it? He never wrote his name. Even when he left his home, I don't know how many of you have seen that note. None of you probably have. It's a note in Tamil he wrote. And all of you, as you know, it starts with the I, that I have set out in search of my father. And there he's referring to the Father, the ultimate self. And then in the very second sentence, he says, no money, no effort be spent on this. His first person had dropped by the time he was writing the second sentence. And at the end, when he says, your college fee has not been paid, to his brother, who had told him to pay 5 rupees if you're going out your extra class on electronics or electricity, rather. That fee wasn't paid because he didn't take that much money. He just went straight to the railway station. And when he writes that footnote and he draws a line, from that day onwards, he never identified with the first, second, or third person. He never called his younger brother, Chinnaswamy, who took sannyas, who lost his wife not soon after, but he came in I'm trying to recall, the mother came in 1916, and he came a few years hence, and he had just lost his wife, and he had a 2-year-old son whom he leaves with his sister. I'm talking about Bhagwan's brother, whose name was Niranjana Nanda Swami, but becomes Niranjana Nanda Swami later on, who was called Chinna Swami. Chinna is younger in Tamil. I don't know Tamil, but I know Chinna means younger in Tamil. Bhagwan never ever said, let's have a discussion. Never. Never treated him in any way where anybody who did not know could ever even fathom, determine, or identify him as his brother. Bhagwan never picked up his brother's kids or sister's kids or anybody, never had any association like that. And that's the point Bandhu is trying to make, that there was no second person, third person, because there was no first person. He was in Sahaj Samadhi all the time, absolutely detached. It is after the appearance of the first personal pronoun that the second and the third personal pronouns appear. Without the first personal pronoun, there will not be the second or the third. and he lived with it. But any comments, any reflections, any?
Anjuji?
Yes, please.
I
Yes.
just wanted to illustrate what you said before. My friend has a 2-year-old granddaughter, and her name is Lila, and she says Lila this and Lila that. She doesn't understand that she's Lila, and her parents are encouraging her to say I and me, but it's Lila. So yeah, and she's about 2.
Right.
Yeah.
Because until we implant the identity in a child has no ego until that stage. That's why a child, even when child says mom, the child has no intellectual capacity to know that my mom probably has a name, that my mom is a female, that my dad is a male, that my dad probably has a name. It takes them a few years after that when they say, my mom's name is Barbara or dad's name is Hemant. You know, they don't know until then, right? They don't know what their name is. Even when they grow up and they go to first grade, here is the innocence of the mind before the intellect has crept in. Here is the example of our perceiving it. The child comes back from kindergarten or first grade and starts talking to you immediately about all the things and talks to you about this friend and you ask the child, what is the name of your friend? I don't know. They mostly don't know the name of their friend initially. And then they say, oh, his name is so-and-so. So that's the identifications creeping up on us unknowingly. And that's the second, third question. But anyway, thank you. Yes, Veena ji, so nice to see you. Please, go ahead. Pleasure.
Hello, namaskar. Thank
Namaskar.
you. It's good to hear that the heart that Maharshi mentioned, 2 digits to the right. It's good to hear that it's not a physical place that he's referring to.
Right.
It's really because somebody needs to actually, somebody wants him to point it out that he did so.
Yes.
And it may be a good idea just for concentration or for one's own, keeping the mind steady in a particular place. But once that is realized, then obviously it will not be a physical place. It is just a spiritual experience. And Maharshi just kept saying that it's 2 digits to the right, but that's only for people like us.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. Thank you for that reinforcement. Yes, absolutely. As many times, I don't know how many of you recall, and I don't know how many times have I said this, but I've definitely mentioned this in the past, that where is the heart? How do I know I have a heart? Or how do I know that I have an entity within me? And obviously, we are talking about that entity within me, residing in me, not externally. And I struggled with it when I was much younger. And it got revealed to me. I'm not going to go into that incident. It's not about me personal, but remember the times, even now it might happen. It happens much more intensely when we are younger, when our hearts and minds are not layered with so many other imperfections and impurities. You remember the time when you did something wrong and suddenly you felt it and you couldn't describe it, even when you're talking to your mother or your best friend or whatever age you were in, you couldn't describe it and use the expression like, I can't even express it. I can't tell you, but I felt it. That's that heart. That's the heart that tells us, the same heart which tells us, even at this age, whatever age group we are in, the youngest person here is in their 40s. Even when we are going to do something, a voice within us tells us, something communicates. We have used that expression, but then I had the feeling I shouldn't do it. How did you have that feeling? Ask ourselves, how did I have that feeling? That voice spoke to me. That voice is the self. Just to create another parallel, an example of how to identify the self beyond intellect. Intellect tells you read Atma Bodha, Panchadashi. I mean, read Updesaram, read this, read this. And Bhagavan himself said, reading all these things are not going to change the core of who you are. Your thought processes is what you are. Without ever defining or telling us to look at our limited nature. He never did, because he wanted us to focus only on the ultimate goal. He was a master of the most advanced class. It was only up to the pupils to enroll themselves into that. As he very succinctly said at one time, that it is the radio station to which you have to tune yourself to receive the signal. And we have to tune ourselves to that. And this is the process of tuning ourselves by constantly watching ourselves and our pettiness. My pettiness is so much that Punjabi Shabad that I've referred to many times, that when I Hor sab change mada mehi ik mada, something like that. I don't remember the exact words. When I looked around, I found out. After having looked around for people who were not really, this is a good thing for people who always think, what good should I be doing for the society? Even Yogananda Paramahansa asked him the same question. Yogananda Paramahansa was the first person to take an 8mm movie of Raman Maharshi in 1935, as you all might know. Even he asked him the same question, what should we do for the upliftment of the society? And Bhagwan's very crisp, pert answer was, the upliftment of the self is the biggest contribution we can make to the society. And that's all we need to do.
So,
yes, Peter.
Yes. It's kind of maybe somewhat of a whimsical thought, but and it's probably not original, but to imagine a person who is left on an island, for example, at 1 year old or something, has no mother or father, doesn't know anybody, what experience of second and third person would such a being have?
I mean,
no relations with anybody.
Right. You know how Tarzan came into being, right?
There's a story. Yeah.
It's a story. That's exactly what it is. Now, to conjecture as to what would happen to that child is only a conjecture, because the destiny of the child would lead it to whatever it has to be led to.
So the child would have no name. The child, I would have, if it were me, for example, I would have no name. I would have no mother, no father.
Right.
But I would still have mind. And so I would still see a world. And so in some way I would still make the same mistakes, no?
Yes, because the destiny, the prarabdha of that body where the child was left alone on an island, and that there is, I think, one real story, not Tarzan is a fictional story. I think there's one real story of a child in India who was left with the wolves, I think, and grew up with the wolves, I think. And I may be mistaken, but there's some story like that. But anyway, not to digress and not to ponder over this, because this is only a conjecture. The question is a conjecture. Question is not based on anything other than thinking what would happen. Mm-hmm. Just as a person, let's draw a parallel to try to understand. Kids are kidnapped, right? We all know that, right? 5-year-old, 6-year-old kids are kidnapped, right? You saw they're kidnapped. When they're kidnapped at a very tender age, they are brainwashed because they are not in connection at all, in contact with their world that they existed with until that age, a tender age of 5 or 6. And soon they begin to forget. And yet they have an impression of the mother and the father, which never leaves them, right? But the world conjures up to that sad life and has someone else to talk to. And this person's life is being governed in this particular case, let's say if it was a kingpin, a ringleader who kidnaps kids from all over the country, in a particular country, and uses them as beggars. That child, knowingly still has to respond to somebody. So second person, third person will rise for that mind also. But these thoughts have no value, Peter. These thoughts are, this is only an intellectual thought. Your question is an intellectual question. There's no point in discussing that. What would have happened is only the imagination of our mind is always wants to go to somewhere else. Why don't I think, why don't I diminish my second and third persons? Thank you.
So when we talk about the heart,
we
talk about the heart, you described it a little bit, sounds a little bit like my conscience. Knowing that something is right or wrong or something.
Correct. Conscience, soul, Atman, self, reality, existence, experience, happiness, love, all these are one word. How we cognize it is depends on my mind alone. All of us, Peter, all of us have a slight variation of the exact meaning of the word, even though we may know the exact meaning of the word linguistically, we still have a slightly different perception of the meaning. That's the layer of my mind. To give you a subtle example here.
So heart and conscience are equated? Yeah?
You could equate it if you want to. If one wants to equate it, that's fine. But conscience, a psychologist will immediately kick in and say, conscience is not the heart.
Yeah, because I think so also. Because well, when I feel the heart, I feel the heart is the center of my being and the very source from which there is nothing illusory. But conscience can be indoctrination from people who come into my life at a very early age.
Correct. Again, intellectualism. Yes, absolutely true, but an intellectual thought. So, for example, if one were to, here's an example of how to really try and unravel this kind of thinking. Does it matter to me when I don't know something? Like a tsunami just took place near New Zealand in some island, right? This is right. Does it affect me? It doesn't exist for me.
No.
It doesn't exist for me. The child that was just abducted, the child that was just kidnapped somewhere in the world and is being punished right now, or his eyes are being gouged out. Are we aware of it? Are we aware of it? We're not. Because it is not my second or third person. It's not in my cognition because it does not touch me. I'm selfish. When I become cosmic, I become an antaryami. Then I begin to feel the pain of the world without knowing an actual particular incident of somebody being murdered or somebody being raped or somebody being kidnapped. I still feel a compassion that rises as an antaryami in me, that I begin to become aware of everything around me as me. And then
I feel that, and it's a terrible, frightening thing.
It's a terrible one. I missed one word. Terrible what?
It's a terrible, frightening experience.
Right. So it shouldn't be frightening. That's the detachment. We have to go to the other level and detach that I'm made up of prarabdha, to use that word, where I do not control the activities of my life. Not even this dialogue. I don't control it because it's predestined. As Devraj Mudaliar asked Raman Maharshi on a hot afternoon when he was fanning him, and he was sitting, and he was a very bold devotee. When I say bold, what I mean is that he used to ask a very direct question to Bhagwan, so much so that other devotees would talk to each other and say, how dare he talk to Bhagwan like that? And this is recorded. But he would ask Bhagwan, Like Bhagavan would tell somebody in the old hall, giving an example before I come to the point of how destiny, the question about destiny. He has even challenged Bhagavan when Bhagavan would, for example, would have said to somebody, Guru is not necessary. Let's say there are 15, 20 people sitting in the old hall. Somebody asks, is Guru necessary? Some random person. And Bhagavan says, Guru is not necessary. But maybe a month prior to that, Bhagavan had said, Guru is necessary to someone else. Devraj Madalaya would say, but Bhagavan, the other day you said Guru is not necessary. Today you say Guru is necessary. Which one should I believe? He was that kind of bold. So he's fanning Bhagavan, sitting on a hot afternoon in Tiruvannamalai, and he wanted to ask this question. So he puts the fan down, handheld fan. He puts the fan down and he asks Bhagavan, Bhagavan, is everything destined as you say? Every little activity, every little motion of this body, the movement of this body, is that true? Like my fanning you this afternoon on a hot summer day, was this predestined? And you put the fan down. So Bhagavan said, yes, it was predestined. And Bhagavan is a very jovial man. Used to laugh a lot. So he says, and yes, even putting down the fan was predestined. Pick it up and continue to fan, it's very hard. So everything is predestined. And the moment I begin to get this feeling, then my intellectual reasonings, my intellectual extrapolations of my mind, and feeding it by focusing on it, begins to wane and wean. Then it begins to diminish. Then I don't worry about these things because I've got clarity. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, whosoever did today and every time. I'm just going to chant Arunachal Pancharatnam that Bhagavan wrote, and because I thought, since we talked about Bhagavan not even autographing, Bhagavan only had one attachment, if at all we can call it attachment, that was to Arunachala. And he was questioned on that also. This is the only 5 verses he wrote of his own volition for Arunachala. Arunachala Paramatman Aruno Bhavachitta Kanjasu Vikasaya Vai Arunachal Sarvam Bhutva Sthitva Pralinameta Chitram Riddhamityatmataya Riddhyasi Bhoste Vadanti Hridayam Nama Ahamiti Kutayati Tanvishanta Pravishtaya Tamaladhiya Avagamya Swam Rupam Shamyatyarunachalatvayi Nadivabdo Tvaktya Vishayam Bhahyam Ruddha Pranen Ruddha Manasan Satvam Dhyayan Pashyati Yogi Didhiti Marunachalatvayi Mahiyante Tvai Arpita Manasatsvam Sarvam Tava Kritataya Satatam Bhajate Ananya Pritya Sajayatyarunachalatvai Sukhe Magna Srimad Ramana Maharshe Darshanam Arunachalasya Devagira Panchakamarya Gito Ratnam Chatvadaitam Upanishadam Hi Anyatha Sharanam Nasti Tvameva Sharanam Mama Tasmat Karunya Bhave Rakshama Ramaneshwara Rakshama Ramaneshwara. Thank you all. Thank you for your presence. We will meet again. Arunachala. Arunachala.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Bandhuji.
Namaskar. Arunachala.
Arunachala. Arunachala.
Arunachala.
Arunachala.
Arunachala.